Hi there, and welcome to this special edition of Upstream Ag Insights, where we're going to have a conversation with ATP Nutrition founder and CEO, Jarrett Chambers. Jarrett, thanks for being here today.
Hey, Shane, thanks a lot for inviting me to your show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm pumped to chat with you a little bit today, and we'll talk a little bit about what catalyzes it, and we'll get into a bunch of different things. But maybe for listeners who don't know of ATP or aren't familiar with you, maybe just a quick 60-second overview of who you are and what ATP Nutrition does.
Okay, thanks, Shane. Quick overview. My name's Jarrett Chambers. I was one of the founders of ATP Nutrition back in 2010. My background is actually was a soil scientist and then moved over to a plant nutritionist. Hopefully we'll discuss it today. My backgrounds, of course, is in biologicals, developing different products, working in the golf course and the fresh produce industry. And now I've been working in broadacre agriculture for roughly the last 20 years. Back in 2010, I started ATP Nutrition, and we started it as a plant nutrition company. And our real purpose there was, how do we bring something different to the marketplace? And our approach was really take the complexity of plant nutrition and try to make it into a simple, concise form. So we really did that on three platforms now. We had our plant nutrition platform, where we really focused in on soil fertility. We also focus very much on seed nutrition, and we also focus in on in-season nutrition to help spoon feed that plant. The second area that we really helped to drive this was our biostimulant platform, which we integrate into our plant nutrition. And then the third platform that we now have been working on for about a decade is our analytical platform to help analyze what's in the soil as well as in the leaf. So our approach here at ATP with our plant nutrition is really trying to stay very proactive to really help with yield preservation. And by doing that is we really sometimes have to understand the way a plant works. And so by the way a plant works, we actually pre-make products that have the essential nutrients required of the different growth stages in the plant's life cycle for the different crops. And then we formulate biostimulants, one or two or three, into those products to try to get it right 80% of the time. It's really about being proactive. That's really the big thing with ATP, is using the analytics, trying to get it right 80% of the time. And then once we have more information, then we really fine tune that customization.
Nice. No, that's fantastic background on just how you
Yeah.
guys kind of think. We'll dive a little bit more into that, and I think I alluded to it just a minute ago. But one of the things that really drove me reaching out to have the conversation was I was reading Stratus Ag research data where they shared biostimulant specific data, but they were showing the biggest share of shelf amongst biostimulant companies in retails in the U.S. and Canada. And if you look at the US, basically 9 of the top 10 are the major companies. It's Mosaic, or it's Syngenta or Corteva, or it's a company that is independent but then has a partnership or a relationship for distribution via those large players. If you go to Canada, you're number one out of everybody that participates in the market from a biostimulant perspective. And so that really stopped me in my tracks. And so, did when it comes to that, or when you saw that, what was maybe your reaction, or how did you think about that?
I would say yes, we were surprised as a group. We've seen the Stratus research from the previous years, and I think I would support your story in that we kind of were sitting about number 2 or number 3 behind a couple of the very large organizations that have been there, and so we kind of knew that we're playing in a big sandbox, and we need to figure out how we fit. And so when we just saw here, I guess less than a month ago, that our awareness had gone above those organizations, it was really quite exciting.
No, that's good. And maybe we'll dig into this more, but just at a high level, when you look at that and how you got there, is it a better product story? Is it better channel strategy? Is it better timing? Is it something else, a combination, or just quick? We can dive into it more
Yeah.
meaningfully in a second, but high level.
At a high, okay, first of all, I can say yes to all of them, but I really think why we got there was we had great people. We have great people. We have great products, and we have great partnerships. Our partnerships are super strong. And I think even the overarching piece of great people, great products, and great partnerships is our culture. and is so critical in terms of what's so important to us fundamentally and what we believe in and what we consistently have communicated to our partners for the last 16 years. We really haven't wavered on that. So I think our success and our hopeful and our continued success is those three things, and and all of them are very important.
Awesome. So yeah, well, I'd love to dive into like the culture and the people side of things. We'll talk a little bit,
Yeah.
hopefully, about how do you identify good people and the people that can do the commercial and agronomic side. But maybe before that, before ATP Nutrition, just some background on yourself for everybody. Where did you grow up and what was your exposure to agriculture?
Yeah, so grew up here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. My father came from a small mixed farm, and following the war, World War II, for our younger audience, World War II, tried to farm for a while and realized that maybe that was not scalable based off that piece. So again, came into the city, but the roots were there. The roots were always there. Even though we lived in the city, we were raised very farm-like with a lot of the fundamental beliefs. And I think what happened is, as I grew up, really realized how much I love plants, and didn't really know what that meant. I worked in nurseries, worked in tree nurseries, did tree cuttings, did a whole bunch of stuff, and as a student, and then tried to figure out my path. And can I take a horticulture path or a botany path? And I just didn't understand the roadmap to get to a career. And I'm a science guy. And all of a sudden, I went into agriculture, and it's really funny because the family's from agriculture. And all of a sudden, surprisingly, I went into a soil science course and really realized how science, academic science, can be translated into something practical. And I've always said that many times, that agriculture is the practical application of science. And I love science, and this advisor, that light bulb turned on in the second year of university, and I'm like, this is my calling. I can see it.
That's awesome. That's that's super cool, and it's really interesting just given the thing that's always stood out to me about you, and just for people listening, I've known Jarrett since I think 2012 is when we first
Yeah.
met originally. But what's always stood out to me about you is that bridging of the we'll call it the practicality, but it's really the commercial acumen with the science and the technical acumen, which is not a common thing. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But when it comes to your background, you went to the University of Manitoba, you did a master's, and you did a lot of work on mode of action for
Yep.
JumpStart or
Yep.
Penicillium, bilaii,
Uh,
and agrotane, I believe. And so,
yep.
when you look at that, how did those working on those modes of actions, how did that kind of layer in your understanding of products and kind of lead into how you think about building products today, even at ATP?
I was yeah, wow, that goes way back, Shane. Thank you. My memory banks are going to kick in here. That's when I had hair, and my face was more made for TV than it is right now. But anyways, back in my graduate work, I actually was very fortunate to work for a crop protection company, the Elanco Group, and they were working on, now called JumpStart, was called PB50, and it fascinated me with it. And I thought was really interesting is I was quite fascinated with it, and I started asking the head researchers questions, and they couldn't really understand what was going on. I saw that the product was performing. So I actually went to University of Manitoba and said, I really want to work on this project. This is really neat. And so my advisor actually said, no problem. So we worked with Elanco, and we actually did the work to actually figure out where or how is that product working. And I think that was a big shift for me, is rather than just saying it worked in the field, my advisor really trained me on how does it work? How does it really work? And I think this is the fundamental piece. And one of the things that he taught me that I do see with a lot of people that maybe don't have research as their full-time career is what he taught me to this day is, if you do all your research ahead of time, why are we working on this product? What is our expected outcome? How does the product work? If we do all that due diligence ahead of time, the study that we should be conducting is that this product does this task. So now let's build an experiment that demonstrates it. that is very different than when a lot of people say, I'm going to test this product to see how it works. Well, you need to do your science behind the scenes. So this has been my obsession since, the 1990, 1989, where basically I was taught, let's understand how it works. So when it comes to JumpStart, the Elanco was super supportive. Phil and Bios was super supportive. So my advisors allowed us to do all this. How does this product work? How does it improve phosphorus uptake? Does it improve phosphorus uptake? Let's develop experiments to prove this. And it was just, now that you asked that question, it really turned me into what I actually was in the back of my brain all the time to the way I think today.
Yeah. No, it's super interesting, and it's interesting that you mention Elanco. Just given, we've talked about this one on one, and I've written about it too. Of this dynamic of there's just not a lot of groups that do truly understand how their product works,
Right.
why it works, where it works, those sorts of things. If you go to the crop protection world, there's a deep understanding of hey, how does this mode of action work on this specific weed? How is it metabolized in the plant? And so obviously you're taking that scientific capability and that kind of mentality of let's understand that and applying it to plant nutrition, biologicals, biostimulants. And that's still a gap that I don't know. I see it constantly amongst
Yeah.
a lot of these different groups. So it's interesting you hammer that as
I,
something super
yep.
important. And
It's
I think
super important.
that probably leads into even you did some other interesting work. It's fascinating that you've done work on some of the more foundational
Yeah.
early specialty
Super
products because
products.
it was ESN, I believe you commercialized as well. And so I'm just kind of curious when it comes to we don't need to get into the details of
No, no,
ESN
no, I
specific,
love it.
but when you look at controlled release technology, what did that teach you about how the industry thinks about adopting something new or adopting technology or positioning it?
It was so ESN, like again, JumpStart, incredible. I worked on a PB50, became JumpStart, 20 years to get there. NBPT, I did my little piece to help in terms of really understanding that stabilized nitrogen. I worked for Exxon. What a great opportunity. It became many companies after that with ESN. And the team, I was a part of the team, really tried to go after something different. The containerized nursery production was very experienced in slow release fertilizers. The golf course industry was very good on sulfur coated ureas, on a sort of a lower grade slow release fertilizer. So that was a market that we went into that was actually easier to get into because the market was already using slow release nitrogens. Then we went to the fresh produce market, and that was super exciting, but also very challenging. And I think the reason why it was challenging is because the fresh produce market, and as a general view back in the 90s, it was all about water runs. It was all about little and often spoon feeding of nitrogen, generally through the drip tape, was the way it was done, maybe some top dressing on top. So our thesis was, rather than doing all those water runs and everything, let's do an upfront application of a slow release nitrogen to mimic the needs of the crop. And this is where my brain just exploded with adrenaline, because we needed to figure out at what stage in the plant's life cycle did it need so much nitrogen, on pounds of nitrogen per day. So we worked with multiple universities on 21 different crops to figure out how much nitrogen lettuce or broccoli or garlic or onions or strawberries needed every day. And then I got to work with the polymer chemists at Exxon to basically try to create products that release based off the crop's needs. So it was crazy exciting. The market liked the idea of the piece. What happened in this scenario, though, is we were a little bit ahead of our time. We were really on the bleeding edge. The PCAs in California, still, I have hundreds of great friends from the PCAs in California. It took away their ability to pivot as it went. And this was, I think, an area that if we were to do it again, we would have done it differently. We said, use ESN up front. You don't need to use water runs. So that took away their control. What we should have said is use ESN up front to get it right 70, 80% of the way, and then tweak it with water runs at those peak demand periods when you need it. That, I think, would have made the product more successful than it was. But I mean, my goodness, we worked on that product and I learned so much about crop production. And what I learned is about metering out nitrogen and understanding the daily demands of nitrogen in a crop is super powerful. But then at the end of that stage of my life where I'd done this for 10 years, I realized that some of the best way to harness the power of nitrogen is to be sure all of the other nutrients are balanced. And I think it may have been a eureka moment when I was in a meeting and I heard somebody else talking about another nutrient. And even though I'd done my graduate work on phosphorus and they were talking about boron and zinc and potassium, and all of a sudden it clicked in. I go, I'm looking at this as a soil scientist trying to supply nitrogen at a controlled metered rate to the crop. But what I forgot is, what does the crop need? And this was this paradigm shift to say, we need to think like a plant. The soil is our bank account. We need to understand how the soil releases it. But once you get into the rhizosphere and into the plant, that's when we need to understand how the plant functions to harness the power of the fuel. Nitrogen's our fuel, but we need all the other engine parts to make it work. And that's where I went back to a book that I have every copy of it, all 4 copies of it, Mineral Nutrition of Higher Plants by Dr. Horst Marschner, rest his soul. And I started reading it. I'd read in my graduate work, and that's when my eureka moment turned, and I said, I have to evolve from being a soil scientist to be a plant nutritionist.
Yeah.
And that was
No,
another huge turning point in my career.
yeah, kind of that marrying up of those, and it's interesting even just tying this together myself. I've never asked you about that before, but I think it was our mutual friend Bill Zimmer was the one that originally talked to me about looking at like the horticulture industry and the turf grass industry and looking at what they do there to say, hey, how could this apply to broadacre row crops? But just listening to you talk there, I can see where I don't want to be too presumptuous, but
Yes.
the system of chemtrition, when
Nutrition.
you alluded to having seed and in crop and all these different things, it sounds like that experience is really what led you to build out this systems approach at ATP.
Excuse me. Absolutely. So I'll come back and focus in on the story to come to ATP, where I really learned about the systems approach. It wasn't a systems approach back then. Is looking at how do you intensively manage crops or crops at high demand. That's when we saw on tomatoes, on strawberries, on peppers. We were down in California, the massive nutrient demand of that plant at the onset of flowering and filling. And that's where you learned it's almost impossible for the soil itself to supply enough nutrients to the plant. Dr. Thomas Yamashita showed me this over and over again. And so the only way to do it was to run nutrition through the drip and or foliar feed. And I'm thinking, okay, that's fantastic. So now let's go back and take all that we learned here. I still haven't talked about the golf course industry because that's a whole nother space that we'll get to in a minute. That again is the foundation of who ATP is we said, how does every plant function? You have a vegetative stage and you have a reproductive stage. And then all of a sudden the science shows that there's 4 key natural stress periods in a plant's life cycle: seed germination, the start of rapid vegetative growth, and the onset of flowering. And then we start looking at this, and all plants have it. So then we said, how do we build a strong soil fertility program? But also we now know that seeds are nutrient imbalanced, so we got to hit those things. We also know that those rapid vegetative stages, most soils cannot supply the nutrients in the right ratios fast enough to the plant. So let's supplement it at that point. At the onset of flowering is the biggest yield drop, the biggest yield loss that can happen in a crop. So let's supplement it again with an in-season nutrition. So that really became the system of Chemtrition, the seed, the early foliars, the late foliars.
Yeah, that's awesome, and maybe that's where we'll go, is kind of right into the ATP side of
Yep.
things. You started ATP in 2010. At that time, specialty nutrition and biostimulants were less common than today. But what made you like, obviously you had this sort of vision and this agronomic view, but what made you think that there was a business here that you could go and build a business that could be successful, or really what catalyzed you to found the business?
I think it was a combination of multiple things. So the experience in fresh produce that I talked about. The other piece is I'm now learning more about the Marshner book on mineral nutrition higher plants, getting to know the authors, Dr. Volker Romheld, who also has passed away, Dr. Ishmael Chakmak, who is still a great personal friend of mine that we talk all the time, and those guys got me understanding how the plant works was a key driver. And I really looked at it and I said, why can't we do this on broadacre crops, row crops? Because they have the same physiological issues. And so then I started doing some work, talking with these researchers. And then I all of a sudden went to Europe and I saw the way the European growers are growing winter wheat, growing winter canola and spring crops, and really how they put very little emphasis on soil application. And it's all about the plant. And I'm thinking, okay, if they're doing that, fresh produce is doing that, how do we translate and adjust it for our short season crops? And that's really where it came in. And I just said, yeah, this is very doable. And then the next piece to why I thought it was doable is I also spent 10 years in the golf course industry, where you have the most stressed plant in the world, in my biased opinion. And I say that because you take a putting green, you grow it 5/32 of an inch, you let it grow leaves for a big whopping 22 hours to start to do photosynthesis, and then you cut them off again. And then you make it grow roots, but if it grows too much roots, you have to core the soil and you have to remove the roots from the soil so that you don't get disease. And then you have 200 pairs of 200-pound feet walking over it every day, and it has to be green. That is the most stressed plant out there. And this is where I got exposed to biostimulants, to say, how do biostimulants keep that grass green, make the roots grow properly, ward off infection, and again, have that plant recover and recover and recover. So the golf course industry exposed me to the value of biostimulants. The fresh produce industry voted the value of nutrition. And then we merged the two together. And I just said, this could be a lot of fun. If we can get this to work on broadacre agriculture, now we can really be ahead of the curve, again, in terms of controlling our own destiny as an industry.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. I love the stressed plant
Yeah.
comment. I think that's super fascinating. Maybe on that, when you look at it from a business perspective and starting ATP in 2010, were you early? Were you too early? How do you look at that kind of timing that you had?
Probably a little early. I would say probably early. I didn't think we were, and maybe that was just my positive half full glass that we can be a part of the future. Seeing what other countries did, I'm thinking we just need to translate it. But at the same time, there was also some bad press, bad experiences in the market that we had to deal with. So when we first started ATP, we didn't even call our products biostimulants. We called them bioactivators. We talked about them very cautiously because other companies had really overpromised and underdelivered. So we went in as a nutrition company, and one of our key pieces to make our nutrition work better is the biostimulants. So we actually were very cautious in that, and cautious to a fault, because 4 or 5 years into having developed our system of Chemtrition and getting good awareness and uptake in the marketplace, we had some very key customers ask us and said, we're going to have to go to another company to get biostimulants because you don't have any biostimulants. And I'm like, well, you've actually been using them in your product for the last 4 years. And to me, that was another big turning point in our evolution as a company, saying, wow, we need to start explaining biostimulants to people. We need to dig in. We know how they work. We need to share how they work with people. So we didn't do a 180, but then we started, rather than leading with nutrition and then these bioactivators, we started now making them equal. But as the market has evolved, now we're putting biostimulants a little bit more up front because of so much awareness and maybe lack of clarity on how these work. And so, yeah, that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's funny how you say, like, nowadays it is a lot more it's sexier to talk about
Yeah.
biostimulants now. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that I was out recommending ATP products, and the companies that today are pro gung ho biostimulants were like, don't put that garbage in the tank, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
is the sort of
Yeah.
mentality, and that's less than 10 years ago
Go.
at this
Yeah.
point, and so it's interesting how things have shifted, but I think part of that is because of the science and some of the work that groups
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
ATP have done,
The-
but maybe around that, when it comes to those early days of ATP, who were the first customers? How did you get those first customers? And when I say customers, meaning both on the grower end.
So I think, the first customers, we went to the independent retailers, sort of the people that, always need to be able to be agile, differentiate themselves from some of the larger organizations. And some of them have had experiences in different area. And now again, we didn't always get received with open arms, but again, we got that original core of people. We spent a lot of time not talking about what to expect at the end. We spent probably 80 or 90% of our time talking about why we need to be doing this and how the products works, really explaining the science. And then by explaining the science, we get people to point, this is how you should use it. This is what you should expect. Let's be sure we develop an experience trial that shows that at the end of the day, it's really about not always about increasing yield, these massive numbers. It's really about addressing a stress period or an issue. And did it do that? And then how did it integrate into your program? So I think in this case here, we led with science, we followed with science, we kept things realistic. We shared everything we knew about the science. We did a lot of RNA sequencing work and mode of action work. And then all of a sudden, we created a new revenue stream for these retailers. We didn't do a Me Too. We were trying to grow the pie. And I think that whole piece was really very fundamental into getting adoption, into building our portfolio out.
Sure. And maybe to dig into that comment too around the science and the education, are you specifically informing, were you at that time, so this is,
Yeah.
2010, 11, 12, 13, are you informing them specifically of what a deficiency looks like or how to identify a deficiency, or are you talking about abiotic stresses, or what are some of the things that you have to really zero in on and show with the RNA work or the trial work?
Yeah, so I think it's all different pieces. Like we really were reluctant to show what a zinc deficiency looks like, because we're kind of like, if you see a zinc deficiency, you've already missed it. That was already probably 28 and 35 days ago. Our approach was to stay proactive. We said, if we see this, we're only going to stop the bleeding. Our goal here is about yield preservation. And so then we would then get into the role of those nutrients, how they work in the soil, what the limitations are, and then how the plant takes them up and when it takes it up. And then we would do that for every nutrient that was important for that area. And then tied into that, we would go into the biostimulant and say, this is how the biostimulant works in the plant. These are the genes that it turns on that are generally plant growth promoting genes, such as increasing photosynthesis, increasing auxin production, cell division, increasing nutrient uptake, turning on genes associated with nutrient uptake. So a whole bunch of positive physiological effects. And we would go through the crazy details to whatever level. And I think what was really neat in that piece is we were doing trials where we were intentionally making plants nutrient deficient. We were then putting on a biostimulant. And then through the RNA sequencing work, it would actually showed that because that plant was, and I'll just use this as one of the many examples we have, the plant, we intentionally made it zinc deficient. So it turned off genes that are associated with zinc functions, because if there's no zinc, those functions have to stop, right? It actually turned those genes on to say, please do those zinc functions. But here's the crazy thing, Shane, we never put any zinc on. That becomes the danger. So it said, basically what it told the plant is, you're not zinc deficient, so start turning those functions on associated with zinc in the physiological action in the plant. But if you don't add zinc, what do? You actually are making the plant more zinc deficient, and you're actually creating a negative experience rather than a positive experience. So we spent so much time in that saying, if you don't have proper nutrition, which is very hard because Mother Nature in the soil is very dynamic, you better be sure that you put on the key nutrient or nutrients with that biostimulant so that you get a positive effect. And that was huge. When people understood how they went together based off science, and then we demonstrate in the field, massive turning point. The second piece to your story here is the abiotic stress. And this is where we have too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry. And again, we have lots of abiotic stress going on in the plant. And the biostimulants really showed how it deals with those stresses, whether it's a heat stress, whether it's a drought stress, moisture stress. And we could show it at the gene level, how those biostimulants help up and down regulate genes to deal with that stress. So the two of them together, crazy powerful. And again, the first story, we would maybe glaze over the customer's eyes going, I don't understand what you're saying. And then we would kind of go back and we keep going back to get people comfortable. And then all of a sudden, the conversation turned rather than being, I don't know or care why you're saying about this to, I understand, I need more. I need to understand more. This was the situation I had and I saw that it worked, or this is a situation I had and it didn't work. And that became a science-based discussion, an agronomic-based discussion, rather than a what discussion. It became a why and a how. I mean, it was super, super, super powerful.
Yeah, that's super compelling to hear how you think about that. Maybe on the business side of things too. Again, is how did you fund? Like nowadays, everybody
Yeah,
raises capital
yeah,
all
yeah,
the time, but how did you fund the business? Was it bootstrapped, or did you
yeah,
raise
yeah.
friends and family, or what did that look like?
No, it was just myself and my partner, Ray Chick, and we self-funded it. And we basically said, we think we have a pretty neat system of Chemtrition portfolio that we can go out with. We have some agreements with some suppliers for biostimulants. And let's build a facility. Let's go to our network. Let's take it, let's not go crazy. Let's just build it up and then build from there. So we never really went for other financing in regards to this. And then any products that we were developing, maybe from discovery, we maybe slow walk those a little bit because again, we were self-funded. And I will say in our 16 years of business, the first year of business, I had some obligations from a previous employer. So that's where we built the plant out and we did a lot of development. So that year there was very limited revenue, but after that we've turned a profit every year since.
It's impressive. Good for you guys, and I think it's probably an interesting balance to how do you innovate or bring new products to market and kind of push in a bunch of different directions while maintaining that profitability and not saying, hey, let's go raise, let's go try to do all these different things. But what I've noticed when I talk with a lot of founders nowadays is that the ones that bootstrap, there's this focus almost where they're not getting torn in different directions, or I shouldn't say they always get torn in different directions, but I think sometimes they feel like they have to grow, they have to do these different things. You guys can focus in on doing that scientific education that you talked about earlier, and you really lean into the groups that are buying into that you see a potential route with, and so I can see where that drives some that maybe slower growth lays the
Yep.
foundation for longer term success
Yeah.
overall.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah. Yeah. I think, in that case, Shane, I think I was always told, no, if you think about the products, even think about branding, if we don't have this big money to do the big splashes, the big campaigns, the big marketing, all this type of stuff, whatever we do, let's do it properly. Let's do it professionally. Let's do it consistent with focus, right? The big thing that we've always said is there's more opportunities than we have time for. The most important thing is walking past the opportunities that are not your core. What is your core? What is your goal? And again, maybe your timelines may take a little bit longer, but your fiscal responsibility is so much better because every dollar is yours or your partner's dollar. And you got to think about how do we spend that dollar properly for sustainability, longevity, and scalability. And it's not about, putting 35 sales reps into the field and pounding out this message that you'll increase yield 18 bushels an acre or lower your fertilizer bill by $25 an acre. No, this is about science-based, slow, predictable, and respectful growth.
well it's interesting on that, and you just alluded to this earlier on the early days, but I'm really curious, and I've never asked you this before, but around you chose to formulate in house and do all the manufacturing yourself, right at Oak Bluff, just outside of Winnipeg. Why did you choose to go that route when it comes to the manufacturing side of things?
I think from my background working with chemists, working with polymer chemists, working with engineers, working with Exxon, really saw the value of being able to control things in-house, and spent a lot of time in inorganic chemistry and formulation chemistry. And even when you think the perfect formula on paper, when you put it into real world, it doesn't always come out the way theory says it should. And so having our production plant in-house and that being our major capital investment, it allowed us to tweak things depending upon little things, water source being critical, that raw material source. Let's be sure that we have an ICP. So we have an ICP in-house. So when we get a raw material coming in, we analyze it for purity, even though the manufacturer says it, we check it for purity. And what we learned is sometimes if a product's not quite as good as you expect, it has a major impact on that product at the end of the day. So the production plant gave us the flexibility to do a lot of things, and a lot of control over not only the raw ingredients, but the finished product. And then if we needed to wait for a new product to be sure that everything was stable, we could just wait and sit on it and be sure that it was still good.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems like that almost allowed you to move faster than like. It's easy to say, "Oh, let's put money at something," but when, to your point, you can sit there and iterate pretty readily when
Yeah.
it's all in
Yep.
house. But then also, you don't run into the commercial constraints
Yep.
in the sense that
Yep.
a product gets out to the customer base, and all of a sudden they're like, "I don't like that ATP stuff. It doesn't work, doesn't handle well." You guys get to control all that all the
Yep.
way. So I can imagine that
Yep.
helped with the
And,
growth overall for you guys.
and the other thing that was really interesting, you made a good point here, Shane, is you had your upfront capital cost. But the neat thing is I didn't have to go to a third party toller, let's just say in November, and get into the production queue in February, and then get it shipped to the warehouses and sit on it for 3 months. And I've paid the manufacturer to do this. I could keep things in raw material in warehouse, because those raws can move across multiple products, and then make the product, early on, just in time. We could be making product 2 or 3 weeks before the customer needed it, maybe moved it right to the door. We could save some warehousing fees. We can save logistics fees. So at the end of the day, that was also an additional savings that allowed us to pivot quickly. I mean, one of the things that we always prided ourselves on was and to this day we still do, that our forecasts are 80% are built ahead of time, and we build them accordingly, and the remainder is built on spot. And our goal, and I don't think it has been met, has always been met, is any order that we have that we don't inventory, the product is made and shipped and packaged in less than 24 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, logistics may take 2 hours to 14 hours to get to the customer, but we are made within 24 hours, anything we don't have.
Yeah, that's incredible flexibility, and just in terms of the confidence that can instill
Yeah.
into a partner, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
maybe one last question on this sort of segment. This is more just around the entrepreneurial side of things. Obviously, you've alluded to you're a soil scientist
Yeah.
by background,
Yeah.
got into the plant physiology, but then you're an entrepreneur. You become the CEO of a business, and you have to kind of learn on the fly. But maybe what's the most expensive mistake you made that you'd tell your younger self to avoid or think about?
Oh, I think the one entrepreneurial thing that I actually can talk about is where we brought out a new product in the US. Our strategic partner indicated they needed this many liters or this many gallons of product. So we brought in the raws for that. We brought in the raws for about 25% overage on being optimistic, eternal optimist here. The customer ordered 75% more than what they forecast. We made the 125%. The last 50%, this was during the COVID craziness. And we struggled to find raws. We brought our raws in. We never did our internal checks and balances. We made the product. It went to the market. It was in the market. We looked at our retains, and the product quality was subpar. And you can just say, yeah, we'll just take it back. But what happened is that whole thing was, it was so 11th hour that we had some bad experience with a couple of customers. We saw the problem. And of course, we rectified the problem, but now we still had to now regain the trust of that customer that loved what we did, that ordered 2 times more than we thought. We thought we could satisfy and we couldn't. So I think it sounds awful and it still irks me to this day, but sometimes it's okay to not accept an order if they're already above the forecast. So my thing is, manage that greed at times. And so that's one that I still to this day bothers me, that we should have just said, we're out of raw materials. Unfortunately, we can't supply you any more of that material.
Yeah, appreciate you sharing that. It's I can imagine there's this balance all the time where you obviously you want to grow, but try not foregoing the quality aspects of
Yeah.
things 'cause it can hurt long term and cause headaches. So no, I appreciate you
Uh,
sharing that. We'll maybe go to the next sort of segment.
Okay.
This we already alluded to it too. I Your technical depth with commercial acumen is something that's just not common in the industry. Obviously, you were already technical. You had the scientific background. You've been curious and interested in that segment. But how did you go about building up the commercial acumen and how do you think about getting that integrated into the product and the messaging and the selling and balancing that with your technical skills and understanding?
Whew. Well, again, a little bit of trial and error and a lot of just keeping my mouth closed and listening to people and watching what thing was being done. I think there's a lot of pieces here. My family, my father was a farmer who moved in the industry. He became a chartered accountant. I mean, our hobbies, going to the cabin every weekend, was doing math to see who could do the math the quickest in the car in their head. And of course, I was the youngest of three. So of course, I hated to lose. So I think from a numbers perspective, he got us to visualize numbers and to really say at a high level without a calculator, this multiplied by this, what's roughly that number, and all these little tricks. So I think from a financing, I maybe not have understood an income statement, but I understood numbers, and I think that was a key piece. I was very fortunate, when I watched Elanco and Phil and Bios commercialize ESN, how they did a lot of things right, and how some things were. Let's be honest, that PB50, that JumpStart was ahead of its time. I mean, they were on the bleeding edge. So I saw how they commercialized stuff, and I was very fortunate. My loving wife of 33 years, Carolyn Chambers, she is a marketer. She was a part of the team that launched Roundup Ready canola in Canada, ran the Roundup business for Canada for Monsanto, and you watch what they did with a very robust budget. And so you take all those pieces and you take a whole bunch of zeros off our budget to market, but you see, how did they market? So I think it was watching and learning and listening to what other people did, and then kind of say, how do we modify that to meet our budget and our needs?
Yeah, no, it makes sense on that. Maybe on this kind of goes to something you also said
Yeah,
earlier on culture's big driver of what's made ATP successful. And so, how do you think about either building that culture around this
sure.
sort of bridging of
Yep.
commercial and
Yeah.
technical, and how do you think about hiring people in that context too?
Oh, that Shane, is amazing. Like, this is the most important thing. We actually had a discussion on this yesterday in regards to our culture. The culture is set within an organization. Our organization is an employee driven culture. And it's really important, and we have learned it the hard way and the easy way, is that we don't want all of us to be robots and exactly the same. Like, we don't all of us want to have the same Colby score, which is something, that we do internally. In fact, we do a Colby score before we actually hire people. But we understand, are they an employee driven culture? Are they a shareholder driven culture? Or are they a customer driven culture? And we have found that when an employee doesn't fit within our organization, it's because they're not employee driven and their values are not the same as ours. They are incredible individuals, but not for an entrepreneurial company that's employee driven. We're an opportunity based company. We're employee driven. We talk a lot about transparency. And that transparency to us is very important. That transparency to us, one of our rules of thumb is nobody is allowed to roll their eyes when somebody says something that's wrong. They have to, and everybody's learned that if somebody rolls their eyes in a meeting, you're allowed to politely call them out and say, what did you not agree with what Jarrett said? That can be intimidating if you don't have the same values as our company has. So we really believe, that's a great example, transparency, our fail forward fast piece, which is so important to us, which is basically entrepreneurial. We're going to give you the freedom. We're going to give you the noose to not kill yourself, but maybe kind of cut out the circulation a little bit. And if you need help, we'll take the noose off and then we'll say, what do you have to say? And people say, I made a mistake. I own it and it's not going to happen again. And this is what I learned. And you want to know something? It's a high five and we move on. When we find people that don't want to take that risk, or they say that wasn't my fault, or that wasn't because of me, it was because of some other factor, generally those people don't sit with our organization for a long period of time. The ownership, the transparency, the accountability, these are key things for us as a group. And I find in interviews, we've hired some great people, been with us for 15, 16 years, that may have not have been the best salesperson, the best agronomist, the best researcher, the best accountant, but their culture was key. And I'll take culture, matching culture over skills, 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, and I can definitely agree with the entrepreneurial side of things that
Yeah.
your company has had. I remember being at one of your distributor partners, and they definitely will go out there and make something happen, even if the retailer might not always agree with it in every instance or what have you. But at the end of the day, I think that's also what, when you look at why you guys have been successful and how you get to that number one spot. Everybody wants to have your products on their shelf. It's because you have people that are passionate and actually want to make something happen and want to support them, even though there's always going to be some headaches in any sort of partnership and B2B situation. But
Just-
your team actually cared about always going out there and trying to make something happen, and that's not always the case with
yeah.
every company operating in the sector by any means. So
Yeah, and I think the team, our core team, the majority of our team, almost all of our team, they really feel ownership. When something doesn't go right, there's a product inquiry, there's an invoicing issue, there's a logistic, it doesn't matter. There's a bad call. We take it personally, and we have internal product inquiries to address it right away. The fail forward fast, people take ownership right away. And I think that's critical. We always, one of the things we always say is it's really easy for people to point out your problems and your limitations. But at ATP, you're only allowed to do that is if you propose a potential action for that solution, because pointing out problems is actually quite easy. But the real work is, how do we address those problems, fix them, not let them happen again? And again, we do find that the team that we have right there, they're all about solution-based type of mentality.
yeah, I'm curious. Do you think that also helps with you're kind of alluding to it internally and those conversations, but do you think that also helps with the conversations with the farmer and the retailers? And what I mean by that is, I talk a lot about education and the need
Uh-huh.
for it. You obviously have done it in spades over the last 15, 16 years, getting people educated and informed on it. But part of education is like you can shove, science into somebody, you can give them all the kind of tools, but they still need to overcome the objection that comes at them. They still need to be able to find a solution in the context of a weird situation. And so, is that something that you think has really helped bring agronomists in that can deliver not just the how does this work, why does this work, but overcome those nuanced objections that a farmer might have or a retail agronomist might have?
Yeah, I think that is huge. I think the team at every level owns it. They own every piece. This year, both in the northern tier states in the U.S. as well as parts of Canada, we've had some pretty crazy weather. because that's what Mother Nature is. And it is, from an agronomist perspective, from a plant nutritionist perspective, this is like Christmas. 2026 is like Christmas because the plants are going crazy. Cold springs, excess moisture, excess heat. The plant is doing a whole bunch of wacky and wild stuff. But when we come to this, I think what's really been interesting is every year we get more and more calls on basically saying, this has nothing to do with your product, ATP representative, but can you help me figure out what's happening in this field? And that is one of those big paradigm shifts or eureka moments where we are now a partner. I mean, nothing drives me more crazy than a few things go into a product, or you put a few products into a tank or into a planter, and the one, big company says, that's not our fault. And they point the finger quickly at us or somebody else. That's not the way we work. We work the other way. What is really going on here? And by staying true to our core values and working with our partners to come to the solution for that grower, is we are getting lots of phone calls, lots of field visits. And we've even had situations where our product's not even on that field. And our tech reps are in the field going, I've never seen this before. And sometimes we have the answer, sometimes we don't, but we start that conversation. And to me, I'm going to use the word, even though we don't get paid for it, being a trusted advisor is really important to us. Now we're not selling products. We're a part of increasing the profitability for that grower and increasing the success for that retailer. And that, to me, is longevity and scalability in a company.
Yeah, no, I think you hit on it well, Jared. Of just that dynamic of how do you become that go-to resource for when there is a problem. Like it can be really hard to go just sell a product into a farmer or retailer. Obviously, everybody listening knows that. But if you get out there and you're the one that they call when the problem arises or when they have something that's an issue, and you're the bat signal, so to speak, for being the go-to person around whatever
Mm,
nutrition or biostimulants, you get the call and it just becomes a much easier conversation to be able to get to the right answer, to get to a positive outcome, and to
yeah,
to be able to make positive things happen for all parties.
yeah,
um Maybe on that,
absolutely.
we'll get into how you think about this is kind of a framework. I'm curious if you have a framework work for this, but when it comes to like, obviously you've built a bunch of products. You
Yes.
have, liquid ones, you have granular, you have in like soil, foliar
Yeah.
applied, seed, all these different things. But all some of this technology is some of it's, your raw materials that you can source from anywhere. Some of it's internal proprietary, and some of it is sourced externally. How do you think about doing which, when, and when do you choose one or the other?
I think at the end of the day, I think it's a balance. So one of the things, using our example earlier on, our raw materials for our fertilizer, which is basically chemicals, quality is everything. So that one there, we have to lead with quality and then deal with the price after. So that's key to us. When it comes to some of our proprietary products, ultimately, we love developing our own right from scratch. That takes time, and that's that slow burn. Now we're able to do that slow burn because of because of the profitability of the company. But in doing that, we can't develop all these things. We don't have the greatest ideas. There's many people that have great ideas, many companies have great ideas. We have the product portfolio, we have the production plant, we have the people, and we have some very strong partnerships and access to market. So in those cases there, we got partnerships with companies that maybe have one product that we take from them that we want a certain position on. And again, we don't need a lot of support from them. A lot of times we'll actually do our own RNA sequencing on it to see how they work. We'll figure out how it works. And for that, we want to be sure that I don't want to use the word protected, but we're a preferred customer of theirs. And then we can formulate it into our product. So that process working with strategic suppliers is faster. But again, we still do a lot of work behind the machines to be sure that it works. Again, it's not as time consuming, not as expensive, of course, because time, has a big cost associated with it. So in our case here, we really do a combination of the two where we develop internally, and maybe we'll eventually replace one of our vendors if it's appropriate, or if we have a very strong vendor, we just want to be sure we have a position that it can get to the grower at an economical price, still with good, strong agronomy.
That's awesome. And maybe just on that side of things, when you think about products in general, whether it's like building new ones out, are you guys starting with a there's a specific problem you see in the field and you're like, let's try to find out what we can source to fix that? Or are you guys saying, hey, we need to compete in this area? Or how do you guys think about portfolio construction in that way?
I would say the primary portion of our portfolio construction is what nutrients are impacting the yield preservation of that crop, and then we go, okay, let's go to the books, let's go to the scientists, let's go to our internal scientists and say, what form of that nutrient is the best form to get into the plant to address this problem, and what's the best time? And so again, we really are going that approach where we're seeing trends, we're seeing common threads, we're seeing things happening, and then we will make a new product or adjust an existing product. And some of this, of course, comes from our customers, that they are seeing certain trends, and we will then work with them and make them a custom product to address those issues. And a lot of times it's changing ratios of nutrients or adding an extra nutrient of this nature. And again, so and then so I think a lot of it is listening to the market. I mean, even with our NutriScan showing nutrient imbalances, that's also maybe fast tracking some of formulation adjustments that we need to keep going forward as well.
It's it's awesome, and I think probably it comes from having data and understanding of different soil needs, plant physiology, things, and that really brings me to one product, I guess, that you guys have these days that is unique is NutriScan, a handheld scanner that reads soil or leaf tissue nutrient status and can do it in the field, and so I'm curious when it comes to bringing that product to market, what made you want to bring that into the market and how did you think about going out and getting that built out?
So I think what it comes down to, we step back a little bit. We were talking about earlier, Shane. Our system of Chemtrition is trying to get it right 80% of the time. It's a pre-formulated product with multiple nutrients in it in the right ratios to match the needs of the crop at that time with a couple of biostimulants. That's when we don't have a lot of data. We don't know the seed test, the soil test, the tissue test, but we understand plant physiology and plant nutrition. So we want to get it right 80% of the time. Our goal, of course, since inception, which is sometimes not scalable, is we want to make the best prescription we can for every field. That's really hard as a basic manufacturer. So we saw that soil testing is at 25 to 30% of the fields are tested every year. Soil testing is super important. Yeah, the soils don't move a ton year to year. Only 50% of complete tests. That's really terrible because you need to do a complete test because every 18 essential nutrients or 18 essential minerals, let's be sure we test them all. But then the scary thing was that less than 5% of the fields are tissue tested. So we don't really know what's happening in the field. And we're trying to support somebody putting on additional nutrition without having the numbers behind it. Tissue testing has not been widely used for a lot of reasons. Love tissue testing. One of the big things is speed, accuracy, consistency, and turnaround. Speed and interpretation. So when we met up with the AgroCares group out of the Netherlands, when they were working on initially a feed app, and we knew that they could move to leaf tissue to get results in real time, now we can maybe not make the perfect recommendation, but our recommendation is going to be better than having no information at all. And so doing it in real time really says there's only so many dollars to spend. Where should we spend those dollars? Based off science, based off our experience, these are the nutrients. But now that we have a real-time analytical tool, we measure old leaves, new leaves in the plant, understanding all these pieces that I can go into forever. Now we're making better decisions. And 2026, 2025, 2026, and 2025, this has really been our first sort of years where we've been getting thousands and thousands of tissue samples coming in. And we are getting customers that are phoning up. I'm seeing this issue. I saw it with my eye. The scanner says that. I'm thinking about putting on this product. What do you think? Or what product do you think we should put on? And then our team goes out there and does it. So now we're making educated science-based decisions. So it's super exciting.
Yeah, no, it's I think to your point, it's a big gap in terms of being able to understand what is actually going on in real time in the field, and that speed is huge. Like I remember it was actually, I think it was you or Bill or somebody brought me out a manganese tester back in
Yes.
is
Yeah.
over a decade ago now,
Go.
but it was cool to be able to the engagement you get with the customer to be able to say, "Hey, look what's going on here. We were talking about this nutrient. It is short or it is sufficient, whatever it is,"
Yeah.
and just hugely valuable for having a more in-depth conversation about nutrition and what you're seeing in the crop. So it's cool to see now you're going clear across. Is it every single micro and macro with the NutriScan system?
It's the biggie. So it's copper, zinc, boron, manganese, calcium, magnesium, and PKNS. I believe are those are the biggies. Yeah, but you're right, Shane. This all started with manganese. When I saw the manganese tester from Copenhagen University, I'm like, okay, this thing is really cool. They explained to me the science. Then they did the phosphorus, but again, those are individual nutrients. So we've been chasing this for a lot of years. And we landed on this group here, and we like the calibrations that we've done, the databases that we've developed to create these attention levels with the crop. I mean, it's really exciting. And 2026 again was a real Christmas year for nutritionists because there was numbers that were flying all over the place, and being able to understand why those happened. And then we understood them. And then what's the solution to drive, preserve the yield in the crop? I mean, it's very rewarding, especially when the customers come back and have a very positive experience with the input they put on.
Well, you guys, your go to market with that is through the retail channel, correct? You're basically
Our
licensed.
primary market is through the retail channel. Exactly.
And
Yes.
and so I'm curious on do you get pushback being the manufacturer of the micronutrient that can alleviate the said deficiency shown from the product, or how do you guys overcome that objection, whether from the farmer or from the retail side of things?
So I think that's a great question. One of the key things we do is we're very open to our attention levels. So we actually have used 6 of the major laboratories in North America. We've looked at their attention levels for all those nutrients for all the crops that we have calibrated. We then had multiple discussions with external third-party experts to say, what do we think these attention levels are? So these are your attention levels. We calibrated the unit to one of these major labs. The analysis does never recommends a product. It basically, the result shows you are out of balance in zinc. You are deficient in zinc. If you do not address the zinc deficiency, this is what will happen. So even in our report, we're educating the customer. But then we will also say this could possibly be happening because you had a high amount of phosphorus, which could trigger the zinc deficiency. So we're educating as we go. We want people to say, why is that happening? Now we explain what that's happening. We never talk about the products. It is always an area of concern. But I think the system of Chemtrition and NutriScan is one of our underlying core values of trying to break these barriers down. And what I mean by that, let's look at NutriScan. We have some incredible labs that do their work, but then they do a great job, but then they don't actually tell the farmer what to do. Or the retailer takes those data and maybe doesn't completely know how to interpret it. So at the end of the day, the loser is the crop and the grower. The idea of breaking that barrier between analytics and crop inputs is massive. Just like the system of Chemtrition, where we need to break the barrier between seed companies, crop protection companies, fertilizer companies, plant nutrition companies. We need to be more unified to help the grower out. And this is the fundamental belief in the company is this is where we need to go. And this is where the industry needs to go to break this down. If we say every crop is, phosphorus deficient, every crop is phosphorus deficient, they're going to catch up to it. They're going to catch up to us. We have to basically, present the science, have that discussion with see what they make. But it's a very valid question, Shane, but we really always come back. This is our data. This is our calibration. Let's talk about it. And do we get it right all the time? No, but our intentions are to get it right all the time.
Totally. Yeah, it's great. Well, I'm curious then, where you kind of alluded to it, where it's like this is where the industry needs to go. And so if you look out 10 or 15 years, you've obviously been ahead of the curve on plant nutrition and testing and these sorts of things for a long time now. But when you look out 10 to 15 years, what does the future of nutrition testing look like? Is it less soil tests and more tissue tests? Is it just more of both, or is it more using the likes of the NutriScan, or how do you think about that?
Yes. So again, I'd love for every field to be soil tested every year. I'm not sure if that's fully required. I could build a case one way or the other. What I will say, and whether it's soil test or anything you do, you can't be half in. You got to have both feet in the deep end. If you're going to do a soil test, do a complete soil test. Otherwise, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So do it right, do it properly, do it in a plan, long-term plan. So the tissue testing, we're at less than 5% of tissue testing. Our team uses the analogy. You go to a doctor, you're not feeling well. The doctor says, "Can I take your blood pressure?" No. "Can I do a blood test?" No. "Can I check the temperature of your forehead?" No. "Doc, what's wrong with me?" That's how sometimes we're doing foliar nutrition, right? We're giving only small pieces of information. So the tissue testing, as this market segment needs to grow, because tissue testing does two things. It tells you what has happened to the plant recently, but if you sample properly, what we've been pitching for over a decade, old leaves and new leaves, it can also predict what's going to be happening going forward. That also is in that growing season. But then you tie it to soil tests, you can now be proactive. It's not about the future. The other thing about tissue testing, the more we do it, the more we realize, hey, I didn't do a soil test and I didn't put on potassium and I got a sandy soil and my tissue samples show I'm potassium deficient. Then the conversation should be, are you surprised, Mr. Retailer, Mr. Grower? Well, now that you say it, I'm really not surprised. So what's the solution? Maybe do a soil test, or let's start budgeting more potassium in next year's crop. So leaf tissue analysis is about now. With real time, we can correct now, we can stop that yield loss, and we can go for the future. We have to be doing this. Fertilizer is the largest single variable investment we have in row crops. The more data, the more information we have, the better decision we make. And really, at the end of the day, Shane, in my opinion, I don't think we need to increase our fertilizer budget. I actually think we need to reallocate where that budget goes. I'm not want to say anything bad about anybody. I'm going to by saying this. I think we overapply nitrogen. And I think or our balance of nitrogen to other nutrients is not optimum. And I think to harness the power of nitrogen is to be sure these other nutrients are balanced. And tissue testing is going to do it.
Yeah, it's fair. I think more information to make a better informed decision
Yeah,
is just fundamentally
yeah,
where things are going, and to be more precise. And, the thing that I always love doing tissue tests, but then you always get stuck with this. You're not necessarily getting the whole field. With something like NutriScan, you
yeah,
can start to get more readings across more of the field, or in specific zones or in specific areas, which is hugely
yeah.
beneficial. So,
And I think the key thing around that, just thinking about it, this is not supposed to be a research project when you do tissue testing or soil testing. It is about seeing trends, because you nailed it, Shane. There could be 6 different soil types. There could be 3 microclimates in a field. There could be a whole bunch of other variables. But to trend what is happening is way more powerful than getting stuck on a number. And even the best academic researchers, who you would think would be very academic, always talk about trends. And we find that people, the more they scan, the more they tissue test, the more comfortable they get with the trends and not hung up on a specific number.
yeah, that's so awesome. Maybe staying with what you see in the future on, I'm curious, when you this whole category of
Give-
biostimulants, and I'll call it specialty nutrition, but I'll zero in on biostimulants for a second here, keeps climbing. You see something like a third of Canadian growers are using it, over 50% of US growers. You have over 50% of US and Canadian retailers selling biostimulants. I'm curious, I guess maybe in that, to add more context to that even, but if you look at the grower data too, there's lower satisfaction with some different segment. And again, this is where I hate saying biostimulants, because,
Yeah.
whether you're using a seaweed versus some sort of acid versus something else, or a microbe, you're going to have inconsistent approaches. But, why do you think it, like, or do you think that the category should keep growing, or certain categories should keep growing? Or how do you think about this gap between what's disappointing the retailers and the growers relative to where the optimism is in having that segment grow?
it's going to keep growing for a couple of reasons. The way it's going to keep growing is coming back to a broken record. What's in your product? How does it work? And what should you expect from that? Once the manufacturers explain that to their customer, the probability of success goes through the roof. It really has been a wave for years of overpromising, underdelivering, not explaining what to expect out of a product. So again, we've hyped up these products too much. We need to get them more grounded, more understanding how they work in the plant, and set expectations properly. And setting expectations properly then and understand how they work creates a good experience trial. And I think at the end of the day, that's really what we want to do. There's 140 variables that impact the production of a crop. If you're putting on a nutrition and some biostimulants onto your seed, the purpose of that is to get the seed to germinate quicker, more uniform, cold start the crop, grow more roots. And if it grows more roots, it's going to acquire more nutrients out of the soil. It's going to acquire more water of soil. It's going to help the soil microbiome early on. That's it. That is awesome. That is step one of many steps to grow that crop. But if you're going to say that seed treatment is going to give you 14 bushels an acre, well, that's where the industry gets in trouble. That's where the industry gets in trouble. And so our approach is to set expectations properly, that little and often approach, that stage nutrition approach, stage biostimulants approach. It's going to be there. And I think that one of the powerful things about biostimulants, again, another area that I'm super excited about is in the US, after all these years, we are now moving biostimulants underneath the Fertilizer Institute. Before it was under EPA, it would fall into this weird category of EPA is generally a pesticide sort of more based area, more about killing things, where biostimulants grow things. The definition of a biostimulant, not everybody, but the key pieces in the definition of biostimulant is, what does it do? It increases nutrient uptake, it increases fertilizer use efficiency while dealing with abiotic stress. Well, the first two we've talked about already, Shane. It's nutrition, it's fertilizer. So how do we integrate that into a program? Because we got to think about there's been, when I was in California, when I was in Idaho, there was some legislation that failed, that they were going to limit the amount of nitrogen fertilizer a grower could put onto their crop. The government was trying to basically mandate what the grower can do. If we use biostimulants as a tool to self-regulate ourselves, to show proper stewardship to the non-agricultural people, how we are getting improved our every pound we put on, the plant is taking up more of that pound. Now we're stewarding to the environment, we're stewarding to the people that don't understand ag, and we're still increasing productivity at the rate that we're doing it. Because to feed the world, I'm not worried about that. But to have a non-expert tell us how to feed the world, that's what scares me. Biostimulants are under the Fertilizer Act, or under the TFI now. They're about fertilizer. This is how we're going to stretch our fertilizer dollar. And you know as well as I do, Shane, most fertilizers are not 100% nutrient efficient. So what an opportunity here to do this in so many ways. And it's going to be a key part of it. We go into fresh produce, biostimulants are everywhere. We go into the golf course industry, biostimulants are everywhere. Go in the horticulture industry, biostimulants are everywhere. So it's not new. It's about getting row crop growers, small grain cereals, oilseed growers comfortable with it.
Makes sense to me, and I'm curious, maybe on one specific subsegment of it depends how you define it.
Yep.
Some people call it biofertilizer,
Yep.
some biostimulant, but the most hyped and probably the best funded subcategory is the nitrogen fixing biologicals, and they tend to have the worst satisfaction. The science, depends on where you want to cite those sorts of things. But what do you think that tells you about the segment, or how do you think about that nitrogen fixing biological segment? You don't have to get too into it if you don't want to, but
yeah, it's a tough one. I, I've played with them a lot. I love the science behind them. There is probably a play for them. I think the companies that are developing them, and they have great science. I think the perception in the market, and I'm not saying that the manufacturers are doing this. I think the perception of the market the perception of the market is, this is going to replace a whole bunch of nitrogen. So I can replace this much nitrogen with this product. The challenge is there's so many variables in plant physiology. I mean, let's use a traditional nitrogen fixing product, rhizobium or Brady rhizobium, whether it's on soybeans or peas or lentils or beans. What happens if you put too much nitrogen in the soil? Plant doesn't fix nitrogen because it doesn't release the flavonoids and different chemicals, because it says, I'm not nitrogen deficient, so I'm not going to give you any food rhizobium, so you're not going to fix nitrogen. Is this juggling act in these non-traditional nitrogen fixing crops that there's a point where the plant isn't freaking out, and so as a result it's not supplying the proper food sources for this biology to do its thing? Is it environmental conditions? I'm trying to figure it out. Shane, it's one, I love being on that leading, bleeding edge. This one here is tricky. It's tricky. This is a tricky one. The nitrogen is very personal to everybody. It's a very personal nutrient, whether it's the manufacturer, the retailer, the grower, the custom applicator. It's very personal. And now we're changing the way they look at something they're very comfortable with. So it's like my days at JumpStart. It's like my days at NBPT. It's like my days at ESN. It's like my days of starting Fuller Nutrition. It's a new space, and it will get there. Don't know when, don't know what it's going to look like. But short term, it hasn't been as well received as I think as we would have liked.
Yeah, maybe one double click on that, and you can take this in a different direction. But you guys obviously don't have one in your portfolio. You don't have any microbials, I don't think, in your portfolio, do you?
We have our Syngenta product, which is a consortium of 10 organisms. We only sell that to the fresh produce industry. Everything else, that product, we actually remove the organisms and we concentrate in the metabolites that those organisms produce. We do that for shelf life stability. We also do that for compatibility with fertilizer and our nutrients, and also for ag chem compatibility. Again, we do know that if you put even an organism in a dormant state and give it some type of carbon source or food source, it can start to grow and generate CO2. It really becomes a nightmare. The other thing that we've seen is some of these organisms, when you put them into fertilizer, which is a salt solution, they die anyway. And if they die the wrong way, they can release the wrong metabolites, the ones that may not be beneficial to the plant. So our approach, right or wrong, is to remove the organisms, remove that as a variable in why the product didn't work, and focus in on metabolites to really help make the photosynthetic plant of that plant more efficient.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at all the different options there. I like
Yeah.
the way you frame that. That's it's compelling. And so maybe we'll get into the distribution side of things, which
Okay.
is really the driver that I'm curious to pick your brain a little
Okay.
bit on. I think I've written on, distribution is
Yeah.
king in this segment,
Yeah.
and obviously you've been able to build out distribution without having a bunch of other products, and so I'm sort of curious. You alluded to the science and being out there and educating, and that to me is kind of the big driver of
Yeah.
what's giving you access to the shelf. But I'm curious, as you looked out at, the Cortevas and Syngentas
Just,
and UPLs and all these different
yeah.
groups have came into the market, they can bundle things together, they can leverage their other products, where if you're a
Yeah.
Mosaic, you have immense amounts of tons running through some of these retailers. Has it been more difficult to compete with them over the last 5, 6 years without being able to bundle, or I'm curious how you found that as ATP?
Yeah, it was something that we are still and will very aware of, very got our antennas up to see what's going on. We felt that this was going to bring a lot of credibility to the space. It also was going to become very difficult for a small, an organization like ours to compete against the billion-dollar publicly traded companies. But I think what we did in this is we basically said, let's double down on being the experts in plant nutrition and being the experts in biostimulants and understanding how they need to work together. Independently, they're good. Together, they're great. And I think what we said is this is our lane. This is our area of expertise, and we're going to stick to it. And we're going to have a complete portfolio. So our strategic partner will say, I can get 80% of my product from ATP. And again, our customers, they're time constrained as well. They don't want hundreds of suppliers. They want to try to have good long-term relationships with a company with a large portfolio so they don't have to go elsewhere. And I think what's happened in the crop protection world is they have incredible portfolios, crop protection wise, and then they have these other little beautiful nuggets. And I think the customer is saying, well, really explain that nugget to me. How does it work? How does it do this? On and on and on. And it's only one of the 10 products I may need. So I think some places being well received, but I think what's actually happening is everybody is sort of saying, yeah, we'll use some, but we still need expertise to train our team in this area. We look upon you as an expert in another field. But in doing this, in Canada, and we also are hopefully will announce in the next couple of years here in the US, we do have a co-marketing agreement with UPL where they have a seaweed-based product, it's a very good product, by the way. But again, what's happening there is there's no nutrition in it. And so what we're doing with UPL is we're working together to really show the Chemtrition, the synergy between agrochemistry and plant nutrition. So we have, these marketing agreements where you use a UPL product and you use an ATP product that contains the ATP product that also contains some UPL seaweed in it together to really help increase the productivity of that crop. And I think what happens is then we have experts in different areas coming together, and it makes it actually easier for the customer in a lot of ways because we can all stay in our lane, but we be very cross-functional.
Totally. Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, but that obviously you guys have been doing it for a long time. The nutrition plus biostimulants. I think Dunham Trimmer data shows something like almost 80% of biostimulants go down with a nutrient in them or
Okay.
something like that. So it's pretty significant. And I think if you look at anybody that subscribes to whether you're a Wallace's law, the maximum
Yeah,
person, or you're a Liebig's law, the minimum person, like you fundamentally need to make sure that there's going to be the right nutrients to help get whatever it is activated or elicited, whatever you're trying to accomplish in the plan. So that combo just seems like it's going to continue to grow and make sense. And that's where I do think, I look at companies like ATP where you're better positioned than the larger incumbent organizations that are more crop protection and chemistry seed related, because your core competency is to be able to talk about the physiology of the plant, the soil chemistry, the fertility, those
really.
sorts of things, which not that there's not smart people at those companies like the big crop protection groups have that. It's just not as culturally driven, whereas they're thinking more about like how do we kill these weeds. I think you've talked to me about that in the past. They know very well how to kill things, but looking at it from the fertility and nutrition side of things can be a little bit more of a challenge to build up that muscle, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree.
Maybe on that, and if a founder came to you today that was in the biostimulant segment, we'll say they're in the
Yeah,
biostimulant segment, and
sake of
they were like, Jarrett, how on earth do we go about getting access to the market? How do we think about picking a retailer or picking a channel? Is there any, obviously you've emphasized this around the science and the education
course.
and being solutions focused is kind of a key thing, but is there anything else you would tell them to?
I think the key thing is not that it's perfect, but agriculture has a pretty strong distribution network in both the United States and Canada. And I think trying to go around traditional distribution is not scalable. And that has been proven in the last 10 years, 50 plus times. So to me, the thing is you need to work with the partners that have respect from the growers. So that's the key thing. I think channel is critical. I think the other piece in the channel, which is really challenging for anybody at different stages, is that if you have one product, that channel partner handles a 3-inch binder of products. One product is hard to get airtime. So this is where you have to think about how do I stay relevant to my potential channel partner if I only have one product? So I got to figure out who do I partner with to do that, or how do I work with them in that? That becomes tricky. I mean, one of the things we always say with our team is every time you visit one of your customers, whether it's January, middle of summer, or the fall time, you better have a product that's relevant for what that customer is thinking at that date on the calendar. You have to be using the right things at the right time. So a full portfolio is critical. The other thing I always say is don't overpromise. Don't overpromise. Don't promise the word. Don't bash other companies. And the other thing is you better understand why you're even positioning this product. What problem is it addressing? And not the problem that you think in a boardroom, but the problem that the retailer and the grower thinks. That is, and they may not see it a problem. So, but now you maybe are more efficient. And you need to be sure, we always use the word logistics. We got to be sure that your product logistically fits into the way a retailer and a grower runs their business or grows their crop. It has to fit in.
Yeah.
Just a few
No,
things. Yeah.
good feedback. Maybe we'll go into a different
Okay.
kind of segment of ATP's life, so to speak, and we'll get into the acquisition,
Yeah.
the concentric chapter. We'll
Yeah.
hit on a couple things of, you guys, was it 2018? I think you sold to
Yep.
Inocupor
Yep.
technically is when
Yep.
it was, which was technically a PE backed company, kind of rolling up a bunch of different bio based businesses, sort of thing. And you stayed on there, and obviously still
Yep.
lead and
Yep.
those sorts of things. But I'm curious, when it comes to being inside a venture or a PE backed sort of company, what did it teach you about operating a business relative to, or what did you learn from that relative to being an independent, standalone, bootstrapped business? Was there anything that you could take away or that it taught you to look at differently from the expenses or anything like that?
I think, our group, the Concentra group, we were acquired because of our access to market. We were acquired because of our portfolio and our thought process. And then there was the Synagro product that got integrated into our offering. And so it was a little bit different in that rather than being added as a part of their piece, the parent company's product was being integrated into ours. And so what's really neat about that is integration, like any integration, can have its good days and bad days. But I think the key piece is after all the integration, everything came together, is, the primary private equity groups that are invested in ATP and own ATP really believed in our culture and our vision and allowed us to run the business the way we need to run it to really grow it. And I think they didn't put in processes. We just had conversations on what should we improve, how should we improve our reporting, how should we improve this. And I will say that even though there's always ebbs and flows, I mean, in the last 6 years that we've been with them, I mean, our business is 3.5 times the size that it was before. So again, and I think what that is it's advice behind the curtain, I'm going to say it, to the leadership team. But then they stay behind the curtain, then they let us go to the marketplace. And they're not looking to change the formula. They're maybe looking to dot an I or cross a T. And I think that is why this has been probably very rewarding relative to some of the challenges that other PEs have had. The other thing is we were already making money. So there wasn't that driver in this. The other piece as well is they're patient. I mean, everybody says we're going to do this in 3 years. My running joke is if you say you're going to do it in 3 years, double it and then add another 50%. And that's probably how long it's going to take. And I think our team, our ownership group, sometimes when we would say something, they would actually say, rather than saying it's going to take that long, they would actually go, do you really think you're going to do it that quickly? So again, they really had similar DNA as us. So a very nice ownership group to work with.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really interesting to hear just because, I think I can go read out of other industries and hear how there's nightmares with PE and
Boy,
these sorts
yep,
of things, but it's encouraging to hear that there is some positivity there. Especially, I think if you look at this sector, meaning specialty nutrition, biostimulants, there's some interest from PE
yep,
firms within the industry
true,
still, and I'm sure there's some apprehension. I'm
yep,
sure there's some negatives here and there
yep,
too at the end of the day, but fundamentally, it's not. There's downsides to going to an incumbent organization as well. I'm sure. So
yep,
super interesting to hear on
that,
that front. Maybe on you again have a good vision for the future, and so if you look at from where you sit today, when it comes to the next 10 years, or if you were investing money today, is there a sector of or a segment of the biostimulant so that stand out to you as should keep an eye on, that is under talked about within the industry today? Or just curious how you think about that.
Yeah, I think we have the main families of biostimulants. We have the biologicals, the sort of I'm going to call them the organic acids family, like the humics, the fulvics, the dissolved organic matter. We got the seaweeds or the plant extracts, and we have the amino acids, protein hydrolysates, and then we have this miscellaneous category. I think what's going to happen, what is happening, I look at success of other companies that I talk to. I think it's really about having not looking for, I don't know if you ever used this phrase, Shane, a Frank's Red Hot Sauce. It's Frank's Red Hot Sauce is not the right way to go. I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to dig into using combinations of the different products at specific times in that plant's life cycle to target more specific objectives. So right now we kind of have an umbrella effect at different timings. And I think as the science get more in dense and the analytics get more detailed, I think we can be more precise. The challenge with precision is scalability, because we still have this darn thing called Mother Nature, right? So this is sort of this juggling act, because we've seen that when you combine biostimulants from different families, all of a sudden, all of what you thought you knew is no longer accurate. And because these things all have different modes of action, you have to figure out how to put them together. So this is what's super fun. This is what we spend the majority of our time on, is not only these products that do a really great job, and then how do we do laser focused on a compound or a series of compounds to specifically target drought or heat or rooting or branching or whatever it is. But then should they be standalone, or should they be under this umbrella where you basically, at home, metaphorically, you take a multivitamin, but you're also a little bit low in vitamin B, so you take a vitamin B tablet. That's kind of where we're seeing we're going. Maybe we move away from the multivitamin and we get more specific, but we got to look at timings. I think this area is starting to really gain traction, and I think we're a part of it. We want to be a part of it, and I think it's really neat as we learn more in this space. And then the complement to this, Shane, that we haven't even talked about, is the soil microbiome, which is we've done work with this the last 4 years, really trying to figure out what's happening. Because some people say, well, how can a simple foliar application of a biostimulant with a little bit of boron, or bad example, zinc or phosphorus, how come I got such a great response to my crop? And the question is, well, it supplied that little bit of nutrition that plant needed for 7 to 10 days. Perfect. We nailed it. But why did it work out? Why did it give me such a positive experience? So now we've been working with third-party companies looking at how is that treatment impacting the soil microbiome? How is that plant signaling the soil microbiome to mimic what the plant needs? And this is the crazy stuff that's took me over a year and our team over a year to kind of get our head around. Like, what the plant is then signaling to the soil is providing the soil microbiome to respond similar to the biostimulant responding in the plant. So let's just say you put on a biostimulant and it says that it's going to increase uptake of zinc and phosphorus, just picking this as an example. You study the microbiome, and what you see is the soil biology in the rhizosphere associated with zinc and phosphorus solubilization. That population has gone up. So you really have the plant talking to the soil, and the soil microbiome talking to the plant, this signaling effect. We did a plant talk, we listened speech back in 2012, and people thought we were absolutely crazy. We didn't have the analytics to back it up. 10 years later, I guess 12 years later, 11 years later, we basically are saying that plant is talking to the soil microbiome. So how do we harness the power of the soil? Is through the plant and the signaling, these analytics. This is crazy exciting stuff, and it's going to create more comfort and confidence in your biostimulant.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love that you use the term confidence there. I always think about, like, how do you get somebody to conviction with that product? And, you've talked a lot about the educational side of things and focusing on the science and focusing on how it works and
Yeah,
those
yeah.
those sorts of things. And I think the more analytics, to your point, or we could talk about AI or whatever
Yep.
you want to call it, can help get a better understanding of how those are merged together or how they
Yep.
influence one another. And I think that's what is really exciting. And you talked about it with this dynamic of I think Dunham Trimmer calls it like single biostimulant molecules, and they're more focused on specific things. And I think that's goes back to this focus where it is more like crop protection, where it's hey, we're targeting this specific point in the plant, kills it, and we know that that's the mode of action. We know that it's good on these family of weeds. Use it at this stage, this time. And I get some flack sometimes from people because they say that biologicals and biostimulants shouldn't be thought of in the same way as chemistry and crop protection. But I do think there's a lot of things that you can pull in. You might be one that disagrees with me,
Yep.
Jarrett. I don't know,
No, 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 no,
but
no,
I think
no.
there's some dynamics that you can really pull, and I think there's things you can pull from every different segment and make it unique to biologicals or
I,
biostimulants and everything. But
I think, some Shane, not because I rarely disagree with you, but to agree with you and build on that, I think biostimulants and plant nutrition should be dealt with the same way as crop protection, which is about how do they function in the plant and what does it do? You think about a herbicide. You put on too much herbicide, what does it do? It can kill actually the wrong crop. If you put on too much fertilizer, it kills the wrong crop. You put on too much biostimulant, it can impact the crop. I mean, look at 2,4-D. That's an auxin effect, right? You're putting on it, you're creating this auxin growth, which actually kills the plant. So I think it actually is. It's different, but it's actually the same.
yeah, no, it's I think there's probably a lot that you can go into in the nuance there, and maybe
Yep.
we'll do that in another conversation one day. But
Sorry, Shane.
no, I love it. There's I have a few different questions for you
Okay.
now that I want to quickly get into, and one is just when it comes to ATP over the next 5 years, what are you most excited about for ATP? Is it the NutriScan side of things? Is it these, as you just alluded to, the analytics, or is there something else in there as well?
I think what's exciting in the next 5 years is seeing the Stratus research, seeing that biostimulant adoption is maybe not perfect, but it's going in the right direction. I see the analytics as the foundational platform to improve confidence around plant nutrition. I also think, I know firsthand because we've heard it, is the level of curiosity has gone through the roof with our customers in regards to interpreting the tissue results, which means that we're becoming better agronomists. I'm excited about the passion that people realize that what we call internally, we have to go to a plan B, which is this little and often approach with strong agronomics and strong analytics, strong agronomics. So in the next 5 years, I really see that NutriScan is a platform for moving people's confidence in plant nutrition. And in terms of biostimulants, they're not going away. We shouldn't be scared of them. Ask the hard question to your supplier. What's in the product and how does it work? And it's not Frank's Red Hot Sauce. And if they say any of those, if they can't answer those things or think differently, then I think you kind of got to move away from that supplier. You got to work with people that are here for the right reasons. And again, it really is the right reasons for longevity. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about, we have our U.S. operation for a number of years, our Canadian operation. I'm excited about our growth in the U.S. into the row crops, which is a few years in now, 4 years in now, 5 years in. And that is really growing at a great level. And again, I think understanding how nicely these products integrate in. And, the other thing that we're working on right now, I know it may only be for the northern part of the U.S., maybe I guess it would be the southwestern part of the U.S. as well, and parts of Canada, is working on water-driven yield potential. And I know this is a big area. We have an awesome project right now. It's not a project, it's a commercial project with a crop intelligence where they have 1,400 weather stations out there monitoring soil moisture in the ground. What they have seen is where the water is being taken up, is that where the nutrients are? So this is what's really interesting. In some years, you have your P and your Ks and your zincs and your coppers that, are banded. They don't really move far in the profile, but all the water is being taken up at a foot or a foot and a half deep. No water is being taken up at the surface because it's dry. So the plant is not accessing those nutrients. How do we know that? We do analytics. So now, even though you've put your investment into your soil applied fertilizer, the plant, you are predicting that the plant will become deficient. And so now we can even, with NutriScan, with understanding plant physiology, understanding water acquisition, nutrient acquisition from the soil, we can proactively stop that yield loss, because I think there's 9 years of yield data showing that based off the water level, we should be at, I'm going to use simple numbers, 50 bushels an acre of a crop. We're getting 39 bushels an acre. Why are we doing 11 bushel yield gap? And it's generally because of nutrient stratification and the roots not taking up those nutrients. So can we supplement it to overcome that? I think this is going to be a powerful tool that's going to help stay ahead of the curve. And ultimately, Shane, we haven't talked about it, but one of the things we always say with fertilizer at ATP is fertilizer does not increase yield. It preserves the yield that's been set. And that is the key difference, is we're preserving yield. And understanding water is a part of that yield preservation.
Yeah, it's for it. It becomes like a systematic approach to everything, right? And you're able to actually have a better. It's like you're often functioning with only a portion of the puzzle pieces, so to speak. If you can start to piece those together, you make better decisions. You can get better outcomes, whether that's yield, whether that's quality, whether that's not applying or doing something because you know that there's enough down there to become more profitable as a farmer. So I
Yes.
think that's really exciting for
Yeah.
the entire industry
Yes.
overall. So we'll go into a quick fire round real quick
Okay.
on this. And so, what's one nutrient that you think growers and the industry chronically underrate or undervalue?
Okay. So I'm going to do the cynical answer, then the real answer. Okay.
Okay.
So everybody underrates everything except N and P. My real answer, that's my cynical answer. That's my half empty glass answer, because it seems like after phosphorus, people sometimes lose interest. The one nutrient that we've seen that is expressing itself all the time is boron. Boron is huge. Boron is a nutrient. Its source material is organic matter. And as we grow more crops, and as we have a situation where seeing organic matters are low or getting lower, which means our boron level is getting lower. And if we have high rainfall, the boron's out of the profile. Boron is a nutrient that we have the highest level of uptake in terms of people having discussion.
Great. What's the most overhyped thing in the specialty nutrition biological segment right now?
Use my product and you can reduce your fertilizer budget by 20%, even though they have no idea what the grower's fertilizer program is. So that one drives me crazy. Use my product. It's going to cost you $5, but I can take $5 out of your fertilizer bill. That I don't like that.
Yeah, it's I don't know if we'll ever get rid of that one. Unfortunately, it seems like it's always. I
Yeah.
remember being a summer student and hearing that. But next, I'll ask quickly: a person, a book, or an idea that shaped how you have built the ATP business.
Oh, book or idea. Okay. So quick. First thing that comes to my mind is actually two completely different areas. The one thing would actually be Steve Jobs. And I think I'm going to paraphrase it, but we use it all the time, is the reason why is the clean look that he has. And we've taken his and paraphrased it about making the complex simple. That is a big piece. The other one is how ATP functions is basically Simon Sinek. Always lead with why. That is who we are. That is critical. So from a storytelling, from a science telling, from a positioning, Steve Jobs, Simon Sinek, and from a science side, it has to be the late and great Dr. Horst Marshner of Nutrition Higher Plants.
Yeah, it's you referenced it a few times. I love it. It's still one of the. It sits on my shelf up here, but it's one of the best. That's for sure.
Yes, sir.
Um, what's the best piece of business advice you've ever gotten?
First thing is know your numbers. Whatever department in, know your numbers. It may only be 3 numbers you need to know, but every department needs to know the numbers. The other thing I always like to say is surround yourself with great people. And listen to the customers, listen to the experts. And I think using your ears, using your eyes is critical.
Awesome. And is there anywhere that people can go to connect with you or reach out to you
Yep.
or learn more about ATP?
Yeah. So of course we have our website. I mean, we're both in our core business is United States and Canada. So our website is ATPAG, so atpag.com. We have our 7 account managers in the US, our technical reps in the US. We have our 9 account managers in Canada with a couple technical reps. If you go to that website, we have all of our contacts, both my contacts, our researchers' contacts, our sales contacts, and that's probably the easiest way to get to us.
Awesome. Oh, it's fantastic. I can't thank you enough for being here today, Jared. It's fun to talk to somebody that has built up a successful business
Business.
over
Thank
an
you.
extended period of time. I'm fortunate to talk to a lot of really interesting entrepreneurs. Some of them are still, pre-profitability. They're
Really.
still getting to the point where they can, get their bottom line profitable. And so it's interesting to talk to somebody that's been able to not only build a profitable business, but also build a category in the industry across Canada and the US when it comes to the biostimulants
Stimulants.
and the specialty nutrition and really just overall
The,
plant health for farmers. And so thanks a ton for
thank,
for being here. I always learn something when I talk with you.
Thanks, Shane. I really appreciate it. It's always great talking to you. And again, we think we, I think we have a similar thought process. So there wasn't really anything controversial here today at all. So I do appreciate that. Appreciate you giving some recognition to something that, I think it was your first question around the Stratus research. And, now that we're an hour and a half or so into our conversation, I realize, yeah, it still surprised me. We're very happy, but we're not, we got to keep going. We got to keep going. We got to keep going. We got to keep growing, and we got to keep us servicing our customers at the highest level we can.
Yeah, it's awesome. I look forward to seeing how you guys continue to progress.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.